Do not scratch your eyes.
Hello, you're listening to the Do Not Scratch Your Eyes podcast. I'm Justin.
I'm Cole.
And I'm Peter.
And some breaking news, I believe, Peter. What's going on?
Yeah, but by the time people are watching this, the news will be out. And I thought I'd put something together. I've already been working on something to talk around something called Eppp, and I think we're going to probably cover those bits here, but this is sort of bigger news. So it's now released that Watford have decided to stop running an under-21 side in the Professional Development League as part of the academy. So there's when I kind of seen this news and looked through it, and you know, you have initial reactions, which if people have found out, I'm sure they will have had. And I thought there's quite a lot to consider. Is this, which will undoubtedly be the headline, simply a cost-cutting measure, or is there anything in this that suggests there might be a conscious decision to develop players from our academy into our first team in a different and possibly more efficient way?
So what's the news then? Because what's the headline here?
The headline is we decided to stop running the under-21s as part of the development academy. So the academy runs from, like all academies, all the way through in terms of the age groups until it gets to kind of, you know, under 18. And the under 18 side is the one that had appeared in, for example, the FA Youth Cup semi-final, only the not season just gone, season before.
Yep.
But you also then have an under 21 side, and this is part of academy plans that were put in place, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how and why those things were put in place previously within football generically, and then kind of some kind of exceptions around it. What the idea of it is, what the concept is of an under 21s is that it will build the bridge between the under 18s and getting into the first team. However, under 21s football is not the same thing as something that we've spoken to Adi Mariappa, we've spoken to Lloyd Doyley about, which was reserve team football, which is a different beast entirely. And we'll kind of reference B teams when we go here. But it's basically stopping that. Now, if anybody's gone to see an under 21 game, I think you probably will have come away and gone, well, there isn't that much in there, is there? It's been a bit of a holding stage for players, but there's a reason why that is, in my estimation. I'm going to kind of take you through it. So the question is, in addition to this, if we're removing this, what does that mean for our academy status? Because at the moment we are in academy status or category 2. There is a category 1, there is a category 3, there is in fact a category 4 as well. What does that mean? What does that mean for our academy players and our ability or lack of it to keep more or less of our better players and be remunerated for it? Because there are implications. So let's do that headlines first. Anyone who has looked at our financials, and I've gone through them on a number of times, will realize that this has to be a money-saving exercise for sure. Okay, without Premier League TV revenue and now without parachute payments, our revenue levels are a fraction of what they were only a few short seasons ago. So the club will not be able to decide on anything without considering the financial benefit or cost incurred in the whole thing. So the finances have to be as at least a root cause of considering this, because if you've got money to burn, then yeah, fine, let them play. If you don't, then you've got to consider whether or not you're spending money in a good way. Now, I mentioned this Eppp. It stands for the Elite Player Performance Plan, and it was an FA initiative, and it was voted in 2011. And every medium or small league club academy has been on the back foot ever since in terms of trying to retain their best talent. So, you know, for example, everybody will know Harry Amas, who basically left us and went to Manchester United. People will know, obviously, Jadon Sancho, winner of the, you know, Europa League, UEFA Cup in old money, as far as I'm concerned, with Aston Villa only recently has moved previously. And the general feeling is, well, we didn't really get our just desserts on those, and why weren't we able to retain these players? And this Eppp is basically the reason and the structure. I'm going to give you a little bit about that as we go through. So it was voted into place as the FA and the Premier League wanted to ensure that the best players would progress through to the best academies with the best facilities to assist the England team, which it had perceived had basically fallen behind Spain, France, Netherlands, Germany, etc. So the whole idea was we're going to do everything to make sure the top of the pyramid is as good as it can possibly be. So if you're further down the pyramid, but you've got a player who's really good, well, let's not let you have him for long. Let's get him up to the top end. Harry Amas, Jadon Sancho, for example. However, it did this at the expense of the protections for the clubs who develop them, further down the pecking order. If you have a whole footballing structure that is built on a pyramid, and the strength of a pyramid is built into the width of the base, not just the thing at the top. So if you decide to whittle away at the foundations, guess what's going to happen to the top? Because a lot of clubs are reviewing what they're doing and have reviewed. And we're going to talk about a few of those as we go through. So doing this allowed the biggest clubs with the most money and the most resources to pick up from talent from nationwide, literally, without the risk of a transfer tribunal. An easy thing for me to say on a Monday morning. Never mind. Because what they didn't want to do was go and say, right, we want him, because there had been some instances where the tribunal has said, well, he's worth this much. Those old in the tooth, such as us, will remember, for example, Bruce Dyer going to Crystal Palace for 1.1 million as the most expensive teenager at the time. Well, of course, the clubs don't want to spend big in relative terms. And that was what, 1.2, 1.1 million, something like that. Well, welcome to EPPP. You're not getting that anymore, even if he is good. Effectively, what it allowed was them to, as I say, to go in and pick the best talent across the nation without the risk of a tribunal. Instead, there is a set menu of fees to compensate, the word compensate, the club losing the player, and basically, kind of compensating them for the time that they have coached the player within their academy, and then a potential series of add-ons if the player goes on to make appearances in league football. As a result, we, along with, in fairness, other academies, have basically watched as a succession of what would be deemed our best players, being able to be poached by those bigger clubs without them risking a tribunal and deciding that the player's capability and his potential warrant an enhanced fee. Now, one of the reasons why I was doing this Eppp thing was you may have seen this the other day, which is Matt Jackson, former Hornet, who's now academy director at Wolves. This doesn't just affect Watford. I just wanted to put this here.
The academy system in this country is set up to channel the best players to the biggest football clubs, and we can do nothing about it. And I can give you a list of a dozen players that have left us in the last 3 years from different age groups that walk out on us and our development to go to bigger clubs. Right now, we received last week demands for one of our under-16 players from an agent. And we have a decision to make on that agent walking that player out of our football club, that we invest about £2 million in salary and an agent's fee of £300,000 to retain a player that we've had in our academy for a long time. And that player can just walk out. We have no power to do it. We have an outstanding young goalkeeper in our academy at the moment, and we resisted offers from the big clubs, the biggest clubs, last summer, because we could, at the stage of the cycle that he's at with us in the academy. We expect to lose him this summer, and we can't prevent it. So we produce quality players. We have young internationals in our squads, but the system of those young players at the moment, certainly following Brexit, where it's become incredibly cutthroat in having to retain those players, give us this dilemma where millions of pounds are committed to 16-year-olds, or they walk out on us to go to these clubs. It is a brutal system.
Well, so it's not just Watford. There you have it. Wolves, been in the Premier League a long time, no more obviously, and they are being dealt with by the same card. So for smaller clubs, basically, who had to vote for this, it was akin to allow, basically turkeys voting for Christmas. However, Eppp was a requirement in order for the Premier League to retain and indeed potentially enhance solidarity payments. Remember the use of the word that? Yeah, solidarity payments. Yeah. So the 72 league teams share the TV riches of the Premier League, which again, we are talking about at this moment in time. But this is a decision that's been made in 2011, and it's been ongoing all the time, and we're seeing the response of it. I mean, for a League One or Two team back in 2011, that could be as much as 50% of their revenue tied up in that solidarity payment. So they did a deal with the devil, and this is now where we are. Now, the FA and the academy requirements, they basically do audits of your academy to make sure what you're doing, and there are costs involved in terms of doing it. There absolutely are. So if we go back to the first point, the resulting England performances in tournament football would suggest that it has in part achieved its objectives, and it has done so by whittling away at the very pyramid on which it's based. Clubs received partial funding towards that Eppp academies, but in order to be academies, there are these requirements, and in order to be classified and thus receive the funding, the cost of the various requirements is excessive for anyone but the larger clubs, in all honesty. And a reasonable estimate for a category 1 club per annum is 5 to 8 million, which is not a small amount of money. And I said earlier on, parachute payments have gone. Don't forget, our turnover has gone from 130 million down to about 26 million. If we were going to go and blurt 8 million or 5 million on it, that's a lot. The kind of approximate average cost, or estimate if you will, for a category 2 that we've been running is between 1.5 and 4 million. Again, that's a big chunk of change out of a 26 million turnover if we go by what last year was. And indeed, with harder times and fewer people maybe kind of coming to games or spending through the various different areas and sponsorships being tighter, that might not be as much. So this is a large amount of money. Now, to be category 2, having the under 21 pathway is an integral part of category 2. So we will undoubtedly be coming down to a category 3. Normal cost somewhere between 500,000 and 750,000, because you're not putting in the full time at the very top of that tree for the under 18 to under 21 players. Because what is being proposed is that the under 18 players, or sorry, the over 18 players, the first and second year scholars, I think is the phrase that they might use, who are too old for under 18 football but have been retained by the club, would be working in closer proximity to the first team, and that they would be, in essence, they would be arranging friendly games against competition for them to play. Really, that is the description of what Brentford did back in 2016 when they looked at the Eppp and went, that's inefficient and it's beyond economical kind of viability for us. They stopped their academy completely from 9s all the way through. And of course, everybody looks at and talks about Brentford as, aren't they great what they've done? They have since reinstated the academy once they became a Premier League club, because it was a Premier League requirement. But at that point, they had decided, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to take it away and kind of decide what, kind of work what's best for us. And it sounds like what Watford are looking to do is take that kind of Brentford approach, go in and, I mean, you'll know, Justin, Blackburn Rovers, for example, have spent the last few years, to quote Ian Herbert from 4,000 Holes Blackburn, as he said, hanging around the bins of the big Northwest academies and taking the players who haven't been deemed to be, top level for, in their case, Liverpool, Everton, United, City, all of those teams, getting the ones and giving people a second shot. And that's kind of maybe what we're looking at. That's sort of what Brentford did. They also gave Beckham's son, one of his sons, a bit of contract, a bit of PR, I'm sure, in terms of it. But they basically put them into a team where they would be training, they would be playing occasional games, and hopefully playing games, because the difficulty with the under 21s has been is that it's just an extension of the under 18s. It's more underage football. And when you get to 18, if you're not really pushing to be in a first team somewhere, there's something wrong. You really should. That's the point where the rubber has to hit the road. And there's a number of reasons why it hasn't happened at Watford, in my opinion. Sometimes, we're looking at the players who were in there before Jono and Jimmy necessarily got hold of. We've done well at under 18s, but by definition, the best players that you will have had and generated have been half-hitched. They've been nicked. You know, the Sanchos and the Amases and various other players have been taken by other academies. We got one of them back from Chelsea, but again, he was taken. So let's have a look at the first of all the cost. What's going to be what happens when a bigger club comes in and says we want to half hitch your player? Well, effectively, it comes in two parts: compensation for the games that or for the years that you've actually coached them for. And I'm showing it here on screen, and this is part of their underlying rules. So you get basically a set fee for compensating you for the coaching that you have provided the player in that particular season. So for under nines at category 1, it's £5,000. So if you train with you as an under 9, you've got £5,000. Same thing for category 2, same thing for category 3, because it's a minimal level of it's a minimum level of coaching at that stage. It's only a small amount. They're still in school, but as they get older, it gets more, and the difference between category 1, 2, and 3 change. So 10,000 for category 1 for under 10s, 15,000 for under 11s, 45,000 for 12s. Under 13 is 60,000, and then from 14 to 16, 80,000 per year. Now we're in category 2. That was category 1, and that goes 8,750, 12,500, 30,000 as opposed to 45,000 in category 1, 40,000 as opposed to 60,000 for under 13s in category 1 and 2 respectively, and 50,000 thereafter. With category 3, our ability to get compensation reduces. So it's now 5,000 for 9s, 7,500 for 10s, 10,000 for 11s, 15,000 for 12s, 20,000 for under 13s, and 25,000 per year thereafter. So you can see that there is a concession that you're going to be making in terms of the level of compensation that you can gain back from those clubs in terms of what they can take. However, if you look at those numbers, you're not getting an awful lot of cash out of that initially. It is literally there to compensate you for the training that you have provided. The way that you get potential additional compensation, or as they describe it, contingency, is if the player you have provided to them goes on and plays football matches in league football at a later stage. So here, this doesn't vary depending on what status we have. But for example, if somebody goes and plays 10 games in the Premier League, but they've already been taken from us and they go and play 10 games in the Premier League, we get 150,000. And we get 150,000 for every 10 games up until 70, and then we get 100,000 additional thereafter. So there is an opportunity to get that. But of course, if you've got a player who's played 100 games at Premier League, he's going to be worth a few million straight away. From a big club point of view, they're able to come and take the player on the risk of the first fee, i.e. compensating you for the training that you've given. And then if they do make it, your quid's in. And if they don't, they're not paying you those compensation fees either way. So there's a round of figures there. Basically, for 10 games in the Premier League, you get 150,000. For 25,000 in the Championship, 10,000 in League One, and 5,000 in League Two. So it's kind of, you can see that we would be lowering effectively the compensation, but we wouldn't be making a difference to the contingency compensation. So I think when they've looked at this, they've gone, well, if we do have a Sancho, do we lose anything from being a category 2 or a category 3? And the answer is no, they really don't. The only thing they lose out is the compensation, and that compensation is there for the amount of coaching they've given. Well, if we are down to the category 3, we don't have to provide the same level as we do for category 2. We can actually provide a little bit less, and we're not having to pay for full times for the under 21s, for example. So we can reduce our base cost, still be able to make stuff on it. So for me, it comes back down to that. Well, we've got to consider what is it that where are we spending the money and how. Does all of that make sense so far?
It does. It does. Yeah. Do we know how much we're currently getting per annum out of compensation, and is this going to hurt it, or is it not going to make much difference?
In terms of compensation, it depends whether or not we have players who are taken. But
We'll
I
never
mean,
know
for
when there's
example,
nothing in the accounts that says money that's compensation from other clubs or whatever. Right?
yeah, no, it's not detailed. But let's have a look at Harry Amas, for example, right? So Harry Amas, who went to Manchester United, has had a few appearances there. So has he had more than 10? I'm not sure. So if you know, if we think about those compensations, you know, has he had 10 appearances in the chat in Premier League? I'll have to go and have a look, and I'll put it up here. He's played at Sheffield Wednesday. He's had some games there in the Championship. So theoretically, I think that should still be paid. He's still, you know, doing that. He went to Norwich but got injured. So there should be some contingency payment coming back from there, you know, in terms of that, for that particular player, which when you look at how Amas was developing and how he's gone on and done, that's not really a lot by modern football standards. It's certainly not the 1.1 million that we got in 1994 for Bruce Dyer. And believe
No.
it or not, the price of things have gone up and Mars bars have got smaller, but that's my problem. Don't worry about that. So, you know, we look at that. So the pricing mechanism stops at under 16s because basically as a player's 17th birthday comes around, he can be placed on a professional contract, and that gives its own protections. So in some ways, the under 21s, you know, are protected because they'll be on some form of contract in some way, shape, or form. Whether or not, you know, there's no suggestion that there's compensation to be paid. Again, probably another reason why we've looked at it and thought, fair enough. But in a world where bigger clubs can cherry pick the best of your academy prospects for little money and at little financial risk to themselves, as I've just described, then what we are left with once the players are, you know, gone through the under 18s phase is the best that other people haven't taken, which isn't necessarily the best thing for us. Now, at Watford, there, you know, Watford aren't, let's deal with that. So because Watford aren't the first club to look at under 21 football, it is widely seen now as a sterile environment. And it does little for preparing players really to transition into the first teams. It's really like a holding stage for these players that we don't really know what to do with. We've developed them through the academy, might not be really good enough for the first team, bearing in mind the ones who have been, you know, are off playing with Man City or Chelsea or Man United or whomever. You end up with a bunch of players who can no longer play in the FA Youth Cup and are playing. Plus the fact you're trying to play, you know, kind of years up, but it means you're retaining a squad of players in order to fulfill fixtures in an under 21 league that is doing little to prepare them. Much better, as is my understanding, the club get these players out on loan, get them out far earlier, because it's not seen to be really kind of testing them. I mean, the advent of the EFL League Cup, for example, was brought about again on behalf of the big teams so that they could field their under 21s teams in it. You might have seen those midweek on Sky, where, you know, Crew Alexandra are playing Manchester City's under 21, and the reason is because the league itself was deemed insufficient. So you'll see an increase in loans, which is definitely now seen as a better development and assessment tool really for players' ability to deal with the physicality of adult football, the speed of it, the mental preparedness to deal with an environment where results, you know, matter to stakeholders, be they managers, co-players that you've got, and of course fans. So there's a reason why I think Man City will have looked at Max Allane, have problems getting in and out of the first team under our myriad of managers, more of that in a minute, and gone, no, we want to put Mafuni down there, because he's had to grow up. He's had to grow a pair to try to get in and realize, the grass isn't necessarily greener over there. The boy's done well. He's gone back up. We've then got Mafuni. I think you will see, you know, that is a bonus. And there's already, you know, kind of news on the jungle drum, shall we say, on the grapevine, to mix my metaphors, that Man City, we might see a few more who are sky blue in nature. So an increase in loans, I think, is likely what we'll see. And in turn, we have to get our younger players out, get them prepared to play first team football at an age, because there's no point having a 20 or a 21-year-old who's not going to play first team football. And it's not good for the club. It's not good for the player. Better that they go down and find their way up. You know, their football is littered with fantastic players who had to drop down and then work their way back up. But people like, for example, Les Ferdinand was bought out of Hayes playing in non-league. Kevin Phillips, you know, a Watford fame. Yes, I know, I'm harking back to the 90s, everybody. But he did. He went and played with Baldock Town, having been released by Southampton Academy, and we went and bought him for 10 grand, and then he went on and, then he's playing for England. So it's not good to keep players in a holding pattern because we have a series of fixtures to play, because we have an EPP thing to go with. So I'm really in two minds, and I'm sure the John O's and now Micah Hyde, who is kind of the head of coaching, took over from Jeremy Gilligan at the start of the year, will, I'm sure, have a different look at in terms of maybe the under 21s. But across the whole, it is viewed not as the elixir of all things. Absolutely not. So as I say, Brentford 2016, they closed down their academy. They felt it was economically unviable, and it was an inefficient method of sourcing players for the first team. But since they've gone back in, they have actually started one up. But they've done that because it's an EPL requirement, because we're going to give you loads of cash. You've got to go and do this. At Watford, however, it can't be ignored that the policy that sees us changing the first team manager on average every 16 games at the last count does nothing to allow us on a club level to actually transition young players into the first team anyway. The results kind of orientated short-termism from every head coach basically forces them to go with the tried and trusted. The best example of a player transitioning happened, I think not coincidentally, because Chris Wilder had an 11-game contract, and therefore he knew he was going. He wasn't worried about what happened on game time. So he played Ryan Andrews. He gave him the chance because he made the decision to go, yeah, I'm going to tell you a few home truths. I'm going to tell you what you need next year, and I'm going to play you somebody young who might give you something. He did. He gave us 2 or 3 million quid from the Swiss young boys. So, but since then, it's been a little bit odd. Tom Cleverley, when he got given the gig full time, if you remember, you and I went to an At Your Place, one of those ones that wasn't it was well attended, but it wasn't, kind of sold out or anything, in order to report back. And Tom Cleverley had been part of the academy, so he had relationships in place with John O, in place with Jimmy Gilligan at the time, and they formed a thing called the Performance Squad. I think it was. It might be a different name, and it was the concept that they put into place, which was 6 of the best players from the academy would train with the first team group for a period of 6 weeks, and this exposed the players to adult football, the physicality, the supposed professional standards. I'm using the word supposed in a really big Watfordy type way. And academy players weren't to be gifted appearances, but when injuries occurred, we saw the likes of Nabizada and Messiah Edwards get appearances either from the bench or in some cases, there. Now, that wasn't perfect by any means, but it was, what it meant was the best of the academy was being looked at by the first team manager. Now, how many of those players did Ed still look at? I do not know. But I can tell you one thing: the Performance Squad was immediately binned the moment that Paolo Pezzolano got there, because and in fairness to Paolo, he came in and said, no, I'm being charged with getting promotion. I need men. I don't need boys. So he had no interest in the long-term development of these young players, and therefore potentially the long-term good of the club, because he wasn't about the long-term good. He was about getting in and getting promoted. And of course, well, we know how that went, but that immediately got binned. So it's an example of the fluctuating dynamic of how academy players have struggled to push into the first team arena. Because I appreciate some people will go, well, they're not good enough, or if they're good enough, they'll play. Yeah, no, doesn't necessarily happen. The manager has to go and see them. There has to be an understanding of why they're going to put it through. And Graham Taylor once said, for a club the size of Watford, it is vital, and it is even more vital when we are being successful, remember those days, that we make sure that there is a way to bring through the young talent of the club. He had Tom Wally, who was like a one-man, crikey, force of nature production line of fantastic players who came through. Have we seen the same? Not sure. So, is it a financially based decision? Almost certainly it is financially driven. Is it a strategic decision based upon the best methodology of bringing through first team players? I very, very much doubt it. However, nothing forces you to determine the value of something like a lack of cash. It forces you to look at something and say, are we getting value? And this could well be a decision that ends up with long-term benefits and short-term costs being reduced. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. So is it going to be, it's going to be very, very disappointing for anybody who is on the books at Watford at the age of 19 going, I haven't got under 21s football now, but they're going to arrange friendlies, but I'm going to be in closer proximity to the first team, so I might get seen. I might be conditioned, so it's almost like this kind of the whole development squad might be kind of that's what's put into play. We will see. It's all going to depend on who the coach is. We don't know. But you would hope that this understanding could be put into place. One hopes that the excellent work that Jono and Jimmy Gilligan did in turning around the academy as it was at the time, who were just trying to get results effectively before they went in there. They've put some real robust processes in there. Jimmy moved on to a role in Saudi, I believe it was, and Micah Hyde is there now doing stuff. We hope that those players will look at this and go, okay, it's there. Is it to save money? Of course it is. We haven't got money. Of course it is. Anybody who say anything other than that? Will we come down from Cat 2 to Cat 3? Inevitably, once the audit takes place, because they'll go, and with the under 21s, and they'll go, yeah, no, we don't do that anymore. However, it will reduce the costs of the academy, which is what we kind of need to do, I suppose, in all areas of the club. It's happened in the first team, and I imagine it will. And a lot of people will be looking at this and going, well, all I really care about is the first team. And if it frees up some money to bring in an extra first team player, then I'm happy with that. We also have to look at how we have sourced the first team. We have been doing what Blackburn have been talking about. We've been basically sniffing around the bins of all of the academies. In Europe, we go to Bayern Munich, we bring back Iran Kunda. He's a young player who's come in. We've got basically a sale agreement with them in terms of how much he becomes us. We've seen the same thing with Othman Mama. So it's not like Watford won't accommodate young players. We absolutely will. But what we need to do is make sure that we start entrusting some of our own and making the best use of them, because the number of homegrown players is increasingly important, as we know, and that if we can bring them through, all the better. Eppp does not make it any easier for us to retain players. So I remember seeing on the Watford Observer a few people going, oh, well, about the club around Harry Amas. Nothing they could do. Absolutely nothing they could do. And in the case of, I believe it was Sancho, but apologies if it wasn't, for example, no commercial inducement at that age, obviously, but his dad did suddenly have a job and they had a house in Manchester. So, that was useful at the time, but you might get some things on the resale. So there we go. It's going to be interesting. Is it uncomfortable? Yeah, it is a bit for me. I've got, my heart is in development football. More than anywhere. That's where I operated in football when I did many moons and many stone ago. It's kind of just, it is what it is, and we'll see how people react.
Do not scratch your